My name is Ava. I'm 32 years old, and today I'm sitting in the waiting room of a company I once helped build from the inside out, watching people who used to belittle me compete for a job they don't know I already own. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back. 2 years ago, I would have walked into this same office with a coffee in one hand, notes in the other, and a smile people mistook for submission. I wore beige. I apologised too much. I listened more than I spoke. And in this business, a cutthroat tech consultancy run by old college boys in newer suits, that made me disposable. Or so they thought. Back then, I wasn't their boss. I was their assistant. I scheduled their pitch meetings. I fixed their PowerPoints 5 minutes before the client walked in. I memorised their coffee orders and cleaned up their tantrums. When they talked over me in meetings, I smiled. When they joked that I was too soft for the business world, I laughed like it didn't bruise. But every time I laughed, something inside me quietly stepped back, like I was shrinking to make room for their egos. There's one moment I think about often. It was the day of Jackson's big merger pitch. I'd written most of the proposal myself. Hours of research, predictive modelling, even the hook that closed the deal. But I wasn't invited into the boardroom. I watched through the glass while Jackson stumbled through my lines like he'd only read them once. When the investors clapped, he smirked through the glass at me and mouthed, "Thanks, sweetheart." That day, something in me cracked, not loudly, but like the slow splinter of glass under pressure. Still, I stayed. I stayed because I believed that hard work mattered, that quiet talent would eventually be seen, that one day I'd be more than the girl who fetched the charger. I was wrong, and I was right. The moment that changed everything came on a rainy Tuesday. It always starts on a Tuesday, doesn't it? They called me into a conference room. Jackson, Tom, and Betrayal, the senior partners. I could tell something was off, the way they smiled like they were already somewhere else. "Ava," Jackson said, in that oily voice he used when he was about to screw you over and pretend it was for your own good. "We've been doing some restructuring. Nothing personal. Just business. Just business." That's what they said when they eliminated my position, the one I'd grown from temp assistant to operations coordinator in 4 years. They handed me a folder, a severance package that felt more like hush money, and a signed letter of recommendation filled with backhanded compliments. "She's reliable, quiet, follows direction well." Not a word about the strategy reports I'd ghostwritten, the partnerships I'd initiated, the investor pitch I saved with my rewrites. They didn't see any of it, or maybe they did, and that's why they got rid of me. I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded, thanked them, and walked out. The rain smeared my mascara before the tears could. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment surrounded by empty tea mugs and old notebooks. I stared at a single sticky note I'd saved from months ago, a scribbled idea I'd never pitched because it wasn't the right time. It read integrated consulting model, direct client access, ethical audits, transparent pricing. I remembered how Jackson laughed when I brought it up over lunch once. "That's cute. Ava, you think clients want morality? I didn't sleep that night." I outlined a business model instead. And now, 2 years later, I'm back in the same building, different suite, different floor, and every face around me in this waiting room once sat above me in the hierarchy. They still don't know. This isn't a job interview. This is a test, and they're the ones being tested. My name is Ava. I'm 32, and I'm not soft. Not anymore. Tom is the first to notice me. He does a subtle double take, like his brain can't quite process what his eyes are seeing. I'm still the same Ava to him. Still too nice. Still too quiet. Still the girl who used to fix his calendar after he triple booked himself every other Friday. But I see it. That flicker of something behind his smug curiosity. Fear, maybe, or just the beginning of confusion. Didn't expect to see you here, he says with that lazy grin he always used when cornering interns at after-hours drinks. You applying too? I smile, soft and slow. Something like that. I don't explain. I let the silence sit between us. A silence that used to mean I was unsure, nervous, trying to be polite. Now, it feels different. I let him squirm in it. They all think this is a high-level interview for a mysterious executive position at a rising consulting firm. The email didn't reveal the company name, just a time, a floor, and a request for presentation portfolios. Some of them probably think they've already got it in the bag. After all, they were senior leadership. People like me, people they overlooked. We weren't even supposed to play the game, let alone change the rules. The receptionist calls the first name. Jackson Thorne. He rises like he's still king of the room. His suit is slightly too tight now. He must have gained weight since I last saw him. Or maybe success doesn't sit as easily on him without me there to iron out his failures. He strides past me without a glance. He doesn't recognize me. Not yet. It's not just the new haircut or the charcoal shift dress I'm wearing. It's the way I'm sitting, the way I'm not shrinking, the way I don't greet him like he owns the air. Next is Betrayal. She's wearing those sharp red heels she used to click down the hallway like punctuation marks. She notices me right away. Her eyes narrow slightly, but she masks it with a quick smile that doesn't touch her eyes. Ava, wow. You're here. I say, still calm. It's been a while. She nods too quickly. So, what have you been up to? Her tone is syrupy sweet, but there's tension coiled beneath it. I could tell her the truth. About the silent partner who backed me after I saved his daughter's startup with one of my strategic plans. About the angel investor who believed in my concept because his previous consultant burned him with smoke and mirrors pricing. About how I built a firm from scratch while they were still swapping recycled decks and inflated budgets. But I don't. Some consulting, I say vaguely, trying new things. She hums. Well, good for you. This role, though, it's pretty high level. Might be a bit intense. I nod thoughtfully. I can handle intense. There's a flicker in her eyes again. Doubt or recognition of the version of me she never really saw. 3 more names get called. One by one. They walk past the frosted glass doors into the inner conference room. I know what's inside. A panel. A case study. A stress round, the kind I designed myself. A way to test more than just pitch polish and buzzwords. I want to see who they really are, not who they pretend to be on LinkedIn. Each one is asked the same thing. How would you handle restructuring a firm after a crisis, with client trust on the line, half the team walking out, and a paper trail of shady billing practices? The irony is, they've all lived this scenario. They just didn't know I was the one who left the breadcrumbs. The room thins out. Anxious energy thickens. Tom taps his foot, checking his phone like he's expecting something to rescue him. Betrayal reapplies lipstick that's already perfect. Someone whispers that the woman running this place is brutal, cold, but smart. They have no idea. When the receptionist finally calls my name, I stand without hurry. Their eyes follow me, some with confusion, others with dawning unease. I walk past the same glass doors they entered, but this time, I don't sit in the interview chair. I walk behind the panel table, and I sit in the middle seat. 3 of my own senior managers sit beside me, my CTO, my legal advisor, and my head of operations. None of them came from the old firm. I chose people who saw me for what I was, not what I appeared to be. There's silence on the other side of the glass now. I glance through the glass. Jackson is pale. Betrayal is frozen. Tom just dropped his phone. I pick up the first folder. Next candidate. I say to the room, my voice steady. I look up and I smile. Let them squirm. Let them fight over a position I no longer need to explain. Let them chase a seat at a table I built, while they thought I was just soft enough to carry their chairs. Jackson is the first one in. He walks into the conference room with forced confidence, but his eyes flick to me like he's trying to solve a riddle mid-stride. He pauses in front of the table, as if unsure whether to sit or speak first. Ava, he says slowly, carefully, like he's unsure if saying my name aloud will snap something loose in the room. I didn't realise you were involved with this firm. I don't move. I don't blink. I let the moment stretch just long enough to remind him that the power he once held is no longer in his hands. I'm not involved. I say, I built it. My voice doesn't waver, but it's not loud either. It doesn't need to be. Quiet things can still shatter glass. The other panellists stay silent. We agreed on that. Let me lead. Let them watch. Jackson laughs once, a nervous bark. Wow, you've come a long way. I have, I say, please, have a seat. He sits slowly, like the chair might vanish under him. His hands fidget with the edge of his portfolio, and I recognise the twitch, the same way he used to react when a client asked something he couldn't bluff his way through. I open the folder and begin. We asked all candidates to prepare a response to the crisis case. You've had 30 minutes with the prompt. Let's hear your approach. He clears his throat. Right. Yes. Well, first off, I'd prioritise stakeholder assurance, open communication with top clients, a transparency initiative. I already know his answers. I trained him, unknowingly. He's using recycled language, the same words I used to feed him before meetings. Back then, he said I was a great assistant. Now, he's parroting lines he didn't earn. I let him go on. 5 minutes. 10. Then I interrupt. What would you do if the person responsible for the original billing discrepancy was sitting at this table? He freezes. I suppose I'd have to confront them, assess their role, determine if they were malicious or negligent. I meet his eyes, and if they knew what was happening and said nothing, he swallows hard. That would be different. It is, I say, very different. He finally sees the shape of it, the outline of the mirror I've turned toward him. He doesn't ask for a second chance. Jackson never believed in second chances, not for others. He always said weakness ruined efficiency, but now I can see the cracks in his calm. He knows. He just doesn't know how much I know. We finish the session. He offers a tight smile. No handshake. The next to enter is Betrayal. She walks in like the room still belongs to her. She always had that ability to project control, even when the walls were closing in. Ava, she says, with a tilt of her head. Or should I say, Ms. Monroe? Now, that's up to you. I answer. Have a seat. She does, with more grace than Jackson, but less conviction than I remember. We begin. Her pitch is smoother, more strategic. Betrayal always knew how to dress up a mess and make it look intentional. She talks about ethics, realignment, restructuring leadership. Her buzzwords are polished, her posture perfect. But then, I ask, would you rehire someone who was pushed out unfairly if you discovered their exit was more about politics than performance? She hesitates, not because she's uncertain, but because she knows the trap is laced with history. I think business has to evolve, she says carefully. Sometimes we don't recognise the talent right in front of us, but that's what growth is. Looking back, admitting mistakes. I nod. Would you apologise to the person? Yes. A long pause. I suppose I would, if it felt necessary, interesting. I murmur. I don't need her apology. Not anymore. But I needed to know whether she ever thought I deserved one. She did, in theory, in abstract, but not in action. When she leaves, her heels don't click quite as confidently. The last one is Tom. He enters quietly. There's no smirk now. No jokes. Just a man who looks like he's starting to understand the shape of the story he's in. He doesn't give a speech. He simply says, "You were always 10 steps ahead. Ava, I just never saw it. For the first time." I smile. Now you do. We don't go through the whole process with Tom. There's no need. The interview was never about hiring any of them. It was about watching, about giving them the same silence they once gave me, and seeing what they filled it with. And now I have my answer. I walk out of the panel room, into the hallway, past the glass again. They're all waiting, eyes darting, whispers rippling. They want to know who got the role. I pause at the door. I look at each of them, one by one. There is no role. I say softly. Then I walk away, because that's what they never understood. Some of us don't wait for the world to offer us a seat. We build our own damn table and lock the door from the inside. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious, not because I was gloating, but because silence like that, the kind that follows a moment of reclamation, it echoes. It doesn't rush out of your chest like a scream or crash like a plate against the wall. It lingers. It hums beneath your skin. I lay in bed with the city humming beneath my window, watching shadows stretch across the ceiling, wondering why I didn't feel more victorious. Maybe because victory wasn't what I wanted. Not really. I wanted the truth to be seen. I wanted someone, anyone, to admit what they did. And no one did. Jackson never apologised. He never even acknowledged what he stole. Betrayal masked hers behind semantics and glossy empathy. And Tom, the closest thing I had to an ally, just admitted too late that he saw me. When it no longer mattered, I should have felt powerful. I should have felt satisfied. But what I really felt was tired. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the last page of my old notebook. The same one I had filled with late-night brainstorms and scribbled ideas when they told me I didn't have what it took. That page was still blank. Because part of me hadn't written what I really wanted to say. Not yet. I made tea. Earl Grey. The same kind they used to mock me for bringing to the office. Said it smelled too grandmotherly for a place like ours. I sipped it now with both hands cupped around the mug, like it could steady the ache I didn't want to name. The ache wasn't about the past. It was about what they took with them when they dismissed me. Time, confidence, my 20s, moments I should have spent learning and laughing and building, but instead spent apologising for outshining them in silence. And maybe the worst part, I let it happen. I let them use me because I believed that if I worked hard enough, someone would eventually hand me a place at the table. They didn't. But maybe that was the gift. Because if Jackson or Betrayal had offered me some shiny title or token promotion, I would have stayed, and I never would have seen who I could become without them. That realization came slowly, not in the victory of watching them squirm, but in the quiet truth that I no longer needed them to see me. I already did. Still, something gnawed at me. So I opened a folder from my bottom drawer, one I hadn't touched in nearly a year. Inside was the last thank you letter I ever wrote at that company, addressed to a client who had emailed me, not Jackson, after a deal went sideways. She said, "You were the only one who sounded human." That stuck with me, because it reminded me of the part of me I almost lost, the softness they tried to shame out of me. They called it weakness, but that softness, that empathy, that ability to listen, to absorb, to care deeply, it's what made my firm succeed, where theirs was always brittle. It's what made my clients trust me, stay with me, follow me when I left. That's the part they never understood, the part they couldn't copy or fake or polish into a pitch, because softness isn't weakness. It's the quiet force that bends without breaking. That night, I pulled out my laptop and I wrote a letter, not to them. I had nothing left to say to Jackson or Betrayal or Tom. I wrote it to her, to the girl I used to be. Dear Ava, you did not imagine it. They made you feel small because you were a threat they couldn't name. They fed off your labour and smothered your light and then called you too much the second you dared to shine. But you endured. You got back up. And someday, they will look back and realise the person they dismissed was the very one holding their future in her hands. You didn't need their permission to rise. You only needed your own. I saved it to my desktop. Not because I needed to remember, but because someday, someone else, some other too soft girl in the corner of a boardroom, might need it more than I do. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, not out of restlessness, but something steadier, something like resolve. I showered, dressed in a slate grey blouse and black pants, nothing flashy, just simple, sharp lines. I tied my hair back. No makeup. I didn't need armour anymore. I was done performing for people who only saw surface. At 8:03, I arrived at the office, not my old one, but the new one I designed from scratch. Soft lighting, quiet corners, a window wall that let in enough sky to make the day feel breathable. No glass fishbowl offices, no shrines to egos, just space, intention, people who felt safe enough to speak without fear of being cut off. Maya, my lead strategist, greeted me with a nod and a quiet smile. She never talked much in the mornings. We understood each other. On my desk sat a cream-coloured envelope, thick paper, expensive texture, no return address. I opened it slowly. It was from Tom, a handwritten letter, unfolded in 3 neat lines. Ava, you were right. I should have spoken up. I stayed silent because it was easier, but I always knew they were afraid of you. Not because you were weak, but because you saw them clearly. I'm sorry. If there's ever a chance to work with you, not above you, I'll earn it. Tom. I set the letter down and stared at it for a long time. Not because I forgave him. Not yet. But because it was the first time anyone from that world had taken ownership without asking for something in return. It didn't undo anything, but it meant something. By 10 a.m., I was in back-to-back calls, a government ethics audit pitch, then a startup expansion for a women-led fintech team. I took notes. I listened more than I spoke. I asked the quiet questions no one else thought to ask, the kind that made people pause and say, "No one's ever asked me that before." That was my secret. I never competed by shouting louder. I competed by hearing what others ignored. At noon, my assistant buzzed in. "There's a visitor here to see you. Says she used to work with you. Betrayal." I didn't flinch. "Send her in." She walked in like she wasn't sure which version of herself to be, the polished executive or the humbled rival. She settled somewhere in between. "I'm not here to cause anything," she said, before I even stood. I couldn't leave yesterday the way it ended." I nodded, gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit, if you want." She did, slowly. Her bag rested in her lap like a shield. "I've been thinking a lot about what you asked," she said. "About apologizing, about ownership. I wasn't fair to you. I knew what you were capable of, and I still watched them sideline you. I didn't stop it. I stayed quiet. I thought that if I kept my place, if I didn't rock the boat, I'd survive long enough to lead. But what's the point of leading if you inherit a kingdom built on silence?" That line surprised me. She looked at me, really looked at me this time. "I'm not here to beg for a job. I'm not stupid. I know what I burned. I'm just here to say you were always the smartest one in the room. I just didn't want to admit it because it made me feel replaceable." I exhaled slowly. "You weren't replaceable, Betrayal. You were just scared, like the rest of them." "I still am," she whispered. "But maybe I'm tired of pretending not to be." That was the first honest thing she'd said in years. I didn't offer her a job. I didn't offer her a drink. I just offered what we were both aching for, a moment without masks. She stood to leave. "For what it's worth, I hope you keep building this place. I hope it swallows theirs whole." I looked out the window. "No need." I said, "Ours is already growing. Theirs is just waiting to fall." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. As she left, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, but release. Sometimes, the apology isn't for closure. It's just a mirror, handed back to the person who once shattered it. And now she gets to carry it. Not me. The days that followed passed quietly. No chaos, no drama. Just the steady rhythm of what I'd built. Meetings that ended on time. Ideas that weren't stolen mid-sentence. Emails that didn't need to be rewritten to please someone's ego. This silence, I realized, wasn't emptiness. It was peace. And I had never known what peace felt like until I stopped surviving other people's storms. But still, somewhere in the stillness, I felt it. A pulse. Like something was coming. On Wednesday, it did. Maya walked into my office without knocking. She only ever did that when something was urgent. She handed me her tablet, eyes unreadable. Look, it was an article. One of those exclusive leaks that business blogs thrive on. A whistleblower inside Jackson and Betrayal's old firm had come forward. Allegations of financial misconduct, ghost clients, overbilled hours and falsified audits. It was everything I'd always suspected. Everything I never had proof of when they pushed me out. Now, it was public. Names were named. Mine wasn't among them, but it didn't need to be. I leaned back in my chair, let the words soak in. They were unravelling, on their own, not because I'd taken revenge, but because the truth, when buried long enough, doesn't rot, it resurfaces. "I thought you'd want to see it before the others do," Maya said softly. I nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Is it okay that I feel satisfied?" A smile tugged at my mouth. "It's okay. It means we're still human." After she left, I stared at the screen again. The article had a comment section. Anonymous. Of course. One caught my eye. Everyone knew that place was rotten. The only surprise is how long it took to fall. I didn't type anything in reply. I didn't need to. The world was already answering for me. Later that evening, I walked the few blocks home. It was raining again, the kind of light drizzle that mists your face but doesn't soak your clothes. The same kind of rain that fell the day they fired me. Only this time, I didn't flinch. I passed a coffee shop near the old office. Inside, through the glass, I saw Tom, sitting alone, stirring a cappuccino that had gone cold. He didn't see me. I kept walking, not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. Some ghosts don't need confrontation. They just need to stay ghosts. When I got home, I opened the letter again, the one he wrote. I read it one more time, then folded it neatly and placed it in a small wooden box, along with my old staff badge, the original pitch I wrote for the merger they stole, and a photo of myself at 26, eyes bright, smile trying too hard. Then I shut the box, not to bury it, but to honour it, because for a long time I thought healing meant erasing who I was in those years, the girl who stayed too long, who trusted too much, who said thank you when what she should have said was stop. But now I see it differently. She wasn't weak. She was waiting. She was gathering the kind of knowledge no business school teaches, the kind of strength you don't post about on social media. She was building a future in silence, one breath at a time. And when the world finally stopped mistaking her kindness for incompetence, she was ready. The next day, I sent one email, not to Jackson, not to Betrayal, not to Tom, to every woman I'd worked with who had whispered, "Me too," in hallways or bathroom mirrors, every assistant who covered for a boss who forgot to give them credit, every woman who left quietly and thought she had failed. I wrote, "If you ever want a seat at the table, mine has room. No tests, no masks, no silence, just space. You're not too soft. You're exactly what this world needs." And then I hit send. The replies came slowly at first, one or two in the early hours, cautious, almost uncertain. Is this real? Are you really? Ava Monroe, I remember you. You were the only one who listened. Then came the flood. Some were brief, almost shy. Thank you. I needed this more than I can say. Others spilled with rawness. They said I was too emotional to lead. So I stopped speaking up altogether. I still have nightmares about the office, about not being enough. One woman, a junior analyst I hadn't seen in 5 years, wrote I quit after they told me my energy didn't fit the company culture. I thought they were right. I started waiting tables just to pay rent. But I never forgot the way you looked at me that day. Like I mattered. I think you saved me, even if you didn't know it. I read them all. Every line. Every silence between the lines. It was heavier than I expected. This invisible weight we had all been carrying in separate rooms. I realised something in those moments. The damage they'd done wasn't just personal. It was generational, systemic, a pattern passed down like inheritance. They didn't just belittle us in boardrooms. They taught us to belittle ourselves when no one was watching. They left bruises shaped like doubts. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I wasn't ready yet. Maybe I did need to smile more. They replaced ambition with apology. But now the apologies were coming from us, not to them, but to ourselves. I spent the weekend replying to every message, some with opportunities, Others with just 2 words. You're enough. Monday morning, Maya brought in a proposal. I think it's time, she said. She laid out a new initiative, a mentorship and training pipeline specifically for women who'd been pushed out of toxic companies. No jargon, no fluff, just real, quiet rebuilding. A space to be seen. We called it the Table Project. Within days, word spread, applications, volunteers, donations from allies, even a few messages from men who admitted, for once, that they'd been complicit in cultures that punished softness and rewarded cruelty. Something was shifting, not fast, not loudly, but deeply. And then, one evening, an email arrived that made me pause. From Suthorn and Partners. Subject request for meeting. Message Ava. I've made mistakes. I'd like the chance to speak with you. No pitch, no manipulation, just honesty. Jackson. I stared at it for a long time. He could have ignored everything, slipped into silence, pretended it never happened. But now that the walls were closing in, he was reaching out, not to save me, to save himself. I didn't reply, not that night. I let the email sit there, unread, blinking in my inbox like a ghost, knocking softly at the window. I made tea, sat at the window, watched the city shimmer beneath me. Then I whispered, to no one in particular, maybe just to the girl I used to be. He sees you now, but I didn't feel triumph, not even satisfaction. Only this strange stillness, the kind that comes after a long storm when you realise you're not broken anymore, just quiet and ready. I finally hit reply. Jackson, I'll meet, but not for you, for closure. Ava, not revenge, just the truth, and the sound of a door finally, irrevocably closing. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with wide windows and no privacy. That was my choice. No quiet corners, no shadows for him to retreat into, just the honest light of day and 2 black coffees between us. He arrived 15 minutes early. I arrived 5 minutes late. He stood when he saw me, always performative, still trying to read what I wanted from him so he could shapeshift and give it. Thanks for coming, he said, voice low. I sat, said nothing. He stared at his coffee like it might offer him a script. I've been thinking, he began, about the way things were back then, about how we treated you, how I treated you. I didn't nod. I didn't help him with the words. He cleared his throat. You didn't deserve what happened. You were smarter than all of us. You kept that place running, and we acted like you were lucky to be there. He looked up at me, waiting. I let the silence linger. I came today, I said finally, not for your guilt, but for my clarity. His brow furrowed. I used to lie awake at night wondering if I'd done something wrong. I said, keeping my tone level, if maybe I was too soft, too naive, too invisible. You all made me question my reality. His face tightened, not with defensiveness, with discomfort. Good. Do you know what it does to a person when they give their best and are told it's not enough because it doesn't look like ego? He started to say something, but I held up my hand. No, you're going to listen. That's your role here. He sank back. I watched you take credit for my work. I watched you pat me on the head like a child and then lock me out of meetings I prepared you for. I watched you strip me of my job and call it restructuring, and you all walked away like nothing happened. He looked down, but I didn't walk away broken. I continued. I built something better. I built something real. And now I'm sitting across from you. Not for revenge. Not for closure. Just to make sure you hear this once. Without edits, without filters, without your usual charm. He looked up. I met his eyes. You didn't break me. Jackson, you revealed me. There was a long pause. The cafe buzzed around us, spoons clinking, coffee brewing. The quiet murmur of strangers unaware a reckoning was unfolding at table 6. Finally, he spoke. I was threatened by you. We all were. You made us feel small, and instead of rising, we shoved you down. His voice cracked. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I studied him. And for the first time, I didn't see power. I didn't see control. I saw a man who had built his entire identity on smoke and finally found himself in a room with someone who had learned to breathe fire. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. He nodded, almost relieved. But I wasn't done. I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to forgive you. But I hope one day, when someone like me walks into your next boardroom, you remember this feeling, and you choose differently. He looked like he might cry, but I didn't stay to comfort him. I stood, collected my coat. He looked up like he wanted to say something else. Goodbye, Jackson. And I walked out, into the street, into the sunlight, and I didn't look back. Because that meeting wasn't about tying up loose ends. It was about cutting them clean. That night, I went home and poured myself a glass of wine. I lit a candle, played the old vinyl record I used to reserve for sad days. Only this time, it wasn't sad. It was sacred. I sat on the floor and closed my eyes. I thought about every woman who had ever been told she was too emotional, too soft, too passive. I thought about the girl I used to be, and I whispered, "You made it." No one clapped, no one praised, but I felt it deep in my chest. Peace, the kind that doesn't need to be proven or posted, the kind that just is. The next morning, I woke up with no alarm, no meetings, no deadlines, just light spilling through the curtains, warm and unhurried. It was a small thing, waking up on my own terms, but it felt like a revolution. For years, I woke up to the demands of people who didn't respect me, to 6 a.m. prep calls for their 9 a.m. meetings, to panicked texts about decks they hadn't even looked at until the morning of. I was the backup battery to their carelessness, always plugged in, always expected to respond before they even finished typing. Now, silence greeted me, and in that silence, I made breakfast slowly. Toasted sourdough, honey on thick cut pears, black tea steeped to perfection. No rush. I sat at the window, watched the city stir, and then, as if the universe couldn't resist a little poetic timing, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya. You should see this. Attached was a screenshot. A news alert. Breaking: CEO of Thorne & Partners steps down amid investigation below it. The article unspooled accusations confirmed. Internal memos leaked. Clients withdrawing. The board issued a statement about commitment to reform. Jackson had chosen to resign for the good of the company. It was everything they tried to hide. And now, the world saw them. I didn't gloat. I didn't share it. I didn't even save the screenshot. I just set the phone down, finished my tea, and let it pass through me like a wave that no longer knocked me down. I had already moved on. And yet, something in me still felt unfinished. Not because I needed more from them, but because the story wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the women who reached out, the ones still waiting for their own reckoning, the ones who had whispered, "Thank you and me too," and I thought I was crazy. So I made a list. Names, dates, projects, people, the ones I remembered, the ones they tried to erase. I called Maya. "We're not done." I told her, "Tell me what you need." I smiled. "I need space, an event, a gathering. Not for press, not for optics, for us." She understood immediately. By the end of the week, the plan was in motion. We called it The Return, an invitation-only evening. Not black tie, not corporate. Just a room full of women who had been cut out, silenced, sidelined, and had come back stronger. Women who had stayed quiet for years and now had something to say. We hosted it in an old library we converted for the night. Velvet chairs, soft lighting, real food, no panels, no staged applause, just a mic and a circle, one by one. They stood and spoke. One woman shared how she was fired after taking maternity leave, how they said she had lost her edge. Now she ran a leadership academy for working mothers. Another spoke about a startup where she was told she lacked founder energy. Now she was the youngest investor in that sector. They didn't yell, they didn't preach, they just spoke, calmly, clearly, like women who no longer needed permission to take up space. When it was my turn, I didn't prepare a speech. I just stood, held the mic, let the silence settle. Then I said, they said I was too soft for the business world, so I let them compete for a seat at my own interview. A few chuckles, a few tears. But the truth is, I continued, softness is not a flaw. It's not something to grow out of. It's the reason we're still here, listening, leading, creating something better. I looked around the room, at every face, every nod, every scar. They built something on fear. I said, we're building something on truth. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a chapter anymore. It was a movement. 2 weeks after the return, my inbox overflowed, not with investors or congratulations, but with voices, real ones, women who had never spoken publicly before. They sent stories, some only a paragraph long, others pages deep. One wrote about being forced to smile while her boss made comments about her body in meetings. Another said she was told she was too intense after challenging a marketing strategy, only to watch a man say the exact same thing the next week and be praised for his decisiveness. I read them all, every single one, sometimes late at night, with my laptop dimmed and my chest tight, other times in the morning, with tea cooling beside me and the sun slipping across the hardwood. They came from all over, law firms, tech startups, retail chains, universities, even non-profits, every industry, every city. And the thread connecting them wasn't just pain. It was the way they had all questioned themselves first. Maybe it's me. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I just need to work harder, speak softer, laugh more at his jokes. Every story carried a buried apology to the self, and that broke me in the quietest way. So we created a space for them. A digital archive, not public, not performative. A shared network, secured and sacred. We called it Soft Power. A place to submit truth, not for exposure, but for exhale. Within a week, 200 women joined. By the end of the month, it was over 1,000. We didn't offer a solution. We offered solidarity. And sometimes, that's more powerful than a headline. Then, one morning, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. No note. Just one small file. I opened it on an offline laptop. Protocol for anything unmarked. It was a recording, a conference call. From years ago, I recognised the voices instantly. Jackson, Brielle, and Tom, laughing, talking about how they plan to push me out. She's not going to fight it. Ava's too polite. She'll probably thank us for the opportunity as we're showing her the door. I say we frame it as a restructure. That way it won't get messy. My stomach didn't twist. My hands didn't shake. Because I had already lived it. But hearing it, hearing the smirks in their voices, the certainty in their cruelty, that did something else. It crystallized the truth. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision. I closed the file and stared out the window. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because, for the first time, I had a choice. I didn't need to leak it. I didn't need to expose them. I'd already done something more powerful. I'd survived them, and I had built something bigger. Still, I made a copy, placed it in a locked drawer, not for revenge, just for record. Just so I'd never again let anyone question what happened, not even the part of me that once wanted to believe the best in people like them. That night, I hosted dinner in my apartment. Maya came, so did Lena from Legal, and Iris, one of the interns I had mentored who now ran operations like a seasoned general. We cooked together. No catered nonsense. Real food. Laughter in the kitchen. Jazz playing low. And at one point, between pouring wine and slicing oranges for the sangria, I felt it. That rare, precious hum of something I'd never known in all my years at the old firm. Belonging. Not performative camaraderie. Not polite power games. Real, grounded belonging. I watched them laugh, argue about whether cilantro belonged in salsa, talk over each other like sisters, and I knew, deep in my bones, that this was the culture I had always dreamed of. One where no one had to shrink, no one had to whisper, and no one had to leave themselves at the door. It wasn't loud. It wasn't headline-worthy, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. The first time I visited the old building again, I wasn't planning to stop. It was just on the way. A coincidence, really. I was walking to a lunch meeting when I passed it. The same revolving doors, the same too bright lobby. For a moment, I stood across the street and just watched. The building looked smaller now. Or maybe I was just seeing it without the weight of fear on my shoulders. People still came and went in crisp suits, clutching laptops and iced coffees, talking too fast on AirPods. But none of the old faces remained. Jackson was gone. Brielle had disappeared from LinkedIn entirely. Tom had moved to a firm in Seattle, quietly, like someone trying to outrun their own echo. I almost kept walking. But something pulled me back. Not nostalgia, not revenge, just curiosity. I wanted to see it with new eyes. The scene of the crime. The place where I once gave too much of myself. I walked in. The security guard at the front desk was new, young, kind-eyed. He smiled. Visiting someone? No, I said softly. Just passing through. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button to the 12th floor, and let the numbers rise with me. Each ding felt like a heartbeat. Not fear, not nerves, just presence. When the doors opened, the space was different. New furniture, new branding on the walls. But the bones were the same. I stood in the hallway, where I once stood waiting to be let into meetings I had prepared but was never invited to. I passed the glass conference room where I watched Jackson pitch with my words. The floor still creaked in the same spot outside the kitchenette. I walked slowly, hands in pockets. No one noticed me. That, too, felt familiar, but this time it didn't sting. It felt peaceful, like I was visiting a version of myself I had long since outgrown. When I reached the far window, the one I used to stare out of during late nights cleaning up other people's messes, I paused, looked out over the city. Same skyline, same smog-filtered sunset, but it felt different now, brighter. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a note I had written months ago. Just 4 words, I was always enough. I slid it into the gap behind the radiator. Tucked away, but not hidden. Maybe one day, someone like me will find it. Someone too quiet, too kind, too underestimated, and maybe those words will be enough to keep her going. I left without looking back. On the street, I took a deep breath, the kind that fills your whole body, the kind that tells you you're not holding anything in anymore. Later that evening, I received a call, not from a former boss, from a school, a teacher from a local business program. She said one of her students had read about soft power and asked if I would speak at their end-of-year panel. They said you're the kind of leader they want to be. She told me, not loud, just real. I said yes, not because I needed the recognition, but because I remembered what it felt like to sit in the back of a room and wonder if there was space for someone like me at the front. And now I knew there was, because I built it, and I was never alone. I had just been waiting for the others to arrive. The school gym smelled like old wood and optimism, rows of folding chairs, hand-painted signs that read, "Future leaders and change starts." Here, most of the students wore mismatched blazers and nervous energy. They weren't polished yet. That made them better. I sat quietly in the back at first, watching the panel begin. A man in a crisp suit spoke about mergers. A woman from a fintech firm talked about market disruption. They used phrases like scaling solutions and value-add frameworks. I watched students nod blankly, some scribbling notes they'd probably never read again. Then it was my turn. No podium, no slides, just me, a microphone, and 100 young faces looking up, waiting for something useful. I didn't give them stats. I didn't give them bullet points. I gave them truth. I was told I was too quiet to lead. I said, too soft for the business world, that I needed to toughen up, speak louder, play harder. I paused, but the truth is, I didn't fail because I was too soft. I succeeded because I stopped trying to harden into someone I wasn't. A few students looked up, really looked. One young woman near the front straightened in her seat. Her blazer was 2 sizes too big. Her eyes held something like recognition. I was once pushed out of a company I helped build. My name wasn't on the door, but my fingerprints were on every strategy, every pitch, every client win. I scanned the room. No one fought for me when I was removed. And for a long time, I thought that meant I wasn't worth fighting for. The room was completely still now. But then I realized their silence wasn't a verdict on my worth. It was a reflection of their fear. They feared what they couldn't control. They feared someone who built without needing credit. I let the weight of it hang in the air. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be ruthless to be respected. And you don't have to erase your softness to succeed. I smiled, gently. What you have to be is whole. Afterward, a small crowd formed. A few students asked thoughtful questions. One girl lingered until the end. "I read the article about your company," she said softly. "I didn't think people like you existed in real life." I crouched slightly, met her eyes. People like us exist everywhere. We've just been told to stay small, but not anymore. She smiled. It was shaky, but real. When I left the school, the sun was beginning to set. That pink and gold hour when everything feels like a second chance. I walked slowly, phone off, heels in my hand, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. Not validation, not revenge, not even closure, just presence. When I got home, there was one message waiting, a voice memo. No caller ID. I pressed play. It was Betrayal. I know I said my piece, but I had to say this too. Watching you speak, the clip from the school went around. It reminded me who I wanted to be before I became who I thought I had to be. Thank you for holding the line, Ava, even when I couldn't. I sat down, the phone still in my hand, and I whispered, not to her, not to anyone in particular. I held the line. Now I'm drawing new ones. And in that moment, I didn't feel like I was living a redemption story. I felt like I was finally writing my story, page by page, choice by choice, softly, powerfully, without apology. A month later, I received an invitation, handwritten, cream paper, heavy envelope, no return address. Again, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Tom, inside, a single line. "We're dismantling what's left. Would you join us?" Not to save it, but to replace it. I stared at it for a long time. Replace it. That word. It didn't reek of desperation. It didn't sound like a bid to pull me back in. It felt like something else. A white flag, maybe. Or an acknowledgement that the ground they built their empire on was never solid to begin with. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I called Maya. I got a letter. I said, she knew before I finished. "You thinking about going?" I paused. "I don't know. Would it be a betrayal to what she asked softly? You've already won. The only question is, what are you still trying to prove?" And to whom her words lingered. That night, I went to my rooftop. A habit now. A quiet place. From up there, the city didn't look like competition. It looked like possibility. All those tiny windows glowing in the dark, each one a life, a story, a name whispered into the universe. What did I want? Not vengeance. I'd passed that season. Not validation. I had long outgrown their scale. What I wanted, what I always wanted, was to build something honest. And maybe that meant sometimes sitting across from people who had once tried to erase you and saying, "If you're ready to change, I'll meet you there." The next morning, I walked into a different office, one that used to belong to someone else. Now nearly empty, stripped bare. Just a few papers, an unplugged monitor, a glass wall still bearing the ghostly outline of the old logo. Tom stood at the window. He turned as I entered. "I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't," I said. He nodded. "I wouldn't have blamed you." We sat. No long greetings, no small talk. He slid a folder across the table. "This is everything. Clients, debts, the legal mess. It's broken. But if anyone can rebuild it right, it's you." I looked down at the folder. My name wasn't on any of the pages yet, but I saw the space it would fit into. "I'm not here to fix what you broke," I said. "I'm here to make sure no one else gets broken by it." He nodded slowly. That's fair. We didn't shake on it. There wasn't a deal, just a quiet understanding if I stepped in. It would be on my terms. Later, when I left the building, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear, clean, like a slate wiped not of history, but of shame. When I got home, I opened a new document on my laptop, titled it The New Charter, and I started writing. It wasn't a business plan. It was a manifesto. No meetings where only the loudest are heard. No credit without acknowledgement. No decisions made behind closed doors. No more telling women to be less of anything. Every line I wrote felt like a promise to the woman I used to be. She didn't need revenge. She needed room. And now I was building it, not for them, for us, for all of us. We launched the new initiative 3 months later. No press releases, no ribbon cuttings, just a quiet rollout, a soft opening for something that would grow stronger, not louder. We didn't call it a relaunch. We called it a reimagining, a workplace model built around 3 principles: radical transparency, collaborative leadership, and human-centered strategy. It didn't sound flashy. Investors didn't immediately flock to it. But something remarkable happened anyway. People came, not because we were loud, because we were listening. The first applications came from women who'd left the corporate world entirely, former CFOs turned yoga instructors, analysts who became teachers, marketing managers who burned out and walked away. They weren't looking to climb anymore. They were looking to build. One woman wrote, "I thought I was done with this world. But what you're creating, it feels like a place I wouldn't have to survive." We hired her on the spot, and that became our new metric, not just resumes or titles, but alignment. We asked questions like, what have you had to hide in order to succeed? When did you feel most seen? What part of you do you wish someone had protected sooner? The answers we received changed everything. They became our culture code. Meetings looked different too. We opened every session with 1 minute of silence, a pause to let people arrive as themselves, not just as their output. It sounded strange, but it grounded us. No one rushed. No one postured. People shared when they were tired, overwhelmed, inspired. Honestly, productivity didn't dip. It soared. People created better when they didn't have to armor up. And, slowly, word spread. Not through headlines, but through whispers, the kind that carry farther. We had clients asking us what made our team so cohesive. Why our retention was so high, why our ideas felt deeper, calmer, clearer. We told them the truth. We stopped confusing chaos for innovation. We stopped rewarding harm just because it came with high output. We stopped believing the myth that softness must be sacrificed to lead. One afternoon, Maya called me into the lounge. "You have a visitor?" she said, her face unreadable. I walked in, and there she was, Brielle, but not like before. No red heels, no tight smile, just a woman standing quietly in the space I built, holding a box in her arms. "I brought something," she said. She opened the box and pulled out an old binder, the kind we used for pictures, labelled in my handwriting. "I found this in storage," she said. "It's yours. Always was." I took it gently, flipped it open. My notes, my research, my forgotten diagrams. I hadn't seen this in 5 years. "You kept this?" I asked. She shrugged. I didn't know why. Maybe guilt? Maybe respect? Maybe I just knew that one day I'd want to give it back to you. I nodded. She looked around. "This place, it's beautiful. Thank you." I said. She hesitated. I'm not asking for a job. I'm not even asking for forgiveness. I just needed to say, what you've done here. It made me want to become someone worth working with. Maybe even worth following. I believed her. Not because she said it with polish, but because she said it without needing anything in return. We talked for an hour, not about the past, about the future. What workplaces could be if we let women shape them. What it would mean to build without fear, without pretending, without costuming ourselves in what they once called strength. Before she left, I walked her to the door. She turned back one last time. I used to think power meant never saying you were sorry. Now I think maybe real power is learning when you finally are. She left, and I stayed in the doorway a little longer, binder in hand, memory in chest. It didn't feel like full closure. It felt like full circle. I woke before sunrise. No alarms, no schedule. Just that familiar stillness, the quiet kind that lives in your bones after you've let go of something heavy. Today wasn't a work day. It wasn't an anniversary. It wasn't a milestone I could name. But it felt sacred. I walked barefoot to the window, holding my tea. Outside, the city hadn't woken up yet. Streetlights blinked like soft stars, and a single delivery truck rumbled down the avenue. Everything felt paused, like the world was waiting for something. And so was I. Not for an apology, not for recognition, but for peace. The kind that stays. I thought about her, the version of me from all those years ago, 20-something, trying so hard to matter without making noise, rewriting decks alone at midnight, smiling through meetings while people mispronounced her name and took credit for her work, believing that if she was just a little more agreeable, a little more patient, she might finally be seen. I closed my eyes and pictured her, sitting at her desk, headphones in, coffee going cold. I wanted to reach back through time, to touch her shoulder, to whisper, you won't always feel invisible. You will not stay small forever. You are not soft in the wrong ways. You are only waiting to unfold. Later that morning, I walked to the park. No headphones, no destination. Just air in my lungs and gravel beneath my shoes. I sat on a bench beneath a jacaranda tree in bloom, purple blossoms falling like confetti, soft and sure. 2 women sat nearby, young, laptops open, papers scattered. I don't know if I'm cut out for it, one said, rubbing her temples. You are, the other replied, not looking up. You're just not what they expect. That's not a flaw. I smiled without meaning to. They didn't see me. They didn't need to. The world had changed. Just a little. But sometimes a little is everything. That afternoon, I returned to the office one last time. Not their old office. Not even the reimagined one. The new one. The one we hadn't opened yet. Top floor. Full windows. No corner offices. No power games. Just sunlight. Plants. Whiteboards. Couches you could nap on. And a circular table in the centre, because no one would sit at the head anymore. I stood in the middle of the room, alone, listening, the sound of my own breath, the gentle hum of possibility. I pulled out a folder. Inside, a single page, the final line of our manifesto. I hadn't written it until today. I placed it on the wall by the door, the last thing people would see before they left. It read, "We do not rise by hardening. We rise by returning to ourselves, to each other, to what was always ours. Softness is not what they took from us. It's what we're taking back." I stepped back, let it sink in, and I whispered, to the space, to myself, to the silence. We're here now. No one clapped, no one cheered, but the moment felt full, whole, enough. I turned off the lights, closed the door behind me, and walked into the rest of my life. Not a woman chasing justice, not a woman proving her worth, just a woman at peace, a woman who came back to herself, fully, quietly, powerfully, at last.